Welcome to Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. I hope you can hear me above all the noise behind me. But today the balcony farmer is in my local park. And this Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens has a really interesting history. I have lived in this area for about 20 years, and it's only recently that I really started to get interested in local history. And this is one of possibly other videos that I will do on the history of Vauxhall, starting with the Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. I start here as a balcony farmer, as a balcony gardener, so that's appropriate. But believe it or not, this place, which dates back to the 17th century, used to be the place to be seen. The park, the garden used to be a place of entertainment and all sorts, and it peaked, I think, around the 18th century. And I'll link to all the sources in my video in the description, and also one of the books I'm using. But you can see, if you a little bit of the history, you can pause and read here. If you don't want to hear me droning on, this is a map, so you have an idea of where it is, the orientation, alongside Kennington Lane. It's bordered by major roads, and there's a Vauxhall City Farm, there's the MI6 on the other side, plus residential areas and a St. Peter's Church. And this is a picture of what it used to look like at its peak. So those structures, and it used to have tree-lined promenades and walks and fragrant former gardens and all sorts. There used to be orchestras and live music and hot air balloon rides. I even read in one of the books that some gentry or some connected people from high society left from here on hot air balloons and landed in Germany. It's really hard to believe that, but that is what happened, and I will source all that. So yeah, they used to have hot air balloons, all kinds of entertainment, tight ropes, orchestral music, instrumental music, and even a young Mozart performed here at one point. And it's such a small space, and there, most of it is gone, but there's still remnants of it. And when it's not too crowded, I will show those parts. So here, I'll show you some footage of what it looks like before I sit down and talk about the history. Surrounded by tall buildings all around it, and you'll see it more as we get towards the city farm. And behind me is the railway line, the viaduct, I guess it's called, and the Royal Vauxhall Tavern pub is just behind that tree. And there are two 18-meter poles going all the way up at the entrance. And here is also a grand building here. So now we are heading towards Vauxhall City Farm. It started in the 1970s, it's been running. I think they recently celebrated a milestone. On the right are residential area, that's St. Peter's Church. And we are in Well, today is the 1st of July, so the grass, that's why it's looking a bit dry. Normally it's very green, but we've had a few weeks of heat and actual summer weather, so the grass has turned dry. This is the rest of the pleasure gardens, and you can probably hear the train rumbling along. This is the Southwest Railways train, either heading towards Waterloo or heading southwest. That's the train route. And I will talk about the trees and the plants here another time, because otherwise this video will be way too long. But I just want to give a sense, an orientation. So you can see the residential area. That's also a church, that tall structure. And I went in once, and it was the service was in Spanish, and it looked like, I think, Filipino community use it as their church, or used it back then. I don't know if that's still the case. I thought that was interesting. And turning again towards Vauxhall, you can see the tops of the tall buildings. That's around Vauxhall Cross. You can see the top of St. George Wharf and the St. George Wharf Tower appearing there. That's the tower that was hit by a helicopter in February 2012 or 13. And that's the MI6 building, the green, and the beige building, square building sticking out. And that's the surrounding area. I would take you to the farm, but it is now closed, so not much to see. I do have videos about that farm, if you want to look at that. This is a fenced off area for biodiversity purposes. You will have read that on the notice. It's like a wild meadow type of planting. So this is probably the place to start, good place to start on the history of this place. So let's get into it. Before I start, I want to show this book. It's published in 2009, but I think there's been an update, which I haven't got yet. But some of the things I will talk about are sourced from here, and I'll reference some pictures because it's got some great pictures. This is a map, an old map, so you can see where it is. There we are, there's Vauxhall, and you can see where the river turns sharply towards the north, where Vauxhall is. That wasn't always the case. It used to be, the river used to be a lot wider around Vauxhall, but it's obviously been built up over the years. But that's what it looks like. And so, the history of Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. Where do I start? I mean, this place, it really surprised me because I just wasn't expecting all of this. I mean, today you can see it's a very quiet place. Not much happens. This is evening, not many people here. This is midsummer, height of summer. After work, it's about 5-6 o'clock now. It's very quiet. And we're in a very busy urban area, but it's very quiet. And people with their dogs, but it was a very different place back in the days. And they used to have some wild parties and events out here. So it all began in the 1660s, and the peak of it lasted for about 2 centuries. So there used to be 6 nights of wild, raucous parties. almost non-stop in this place. 2 centuries of debauchery. So let's rewind. You can see from the pictures, this was the time of when Charles II, I think, was on the throne. And when I was reading about it, it was said they were, because they used to have masquerade balls and all sorts of parties where people would wear wigs and masks, and it said something like, the wigs were enormous and the morals were flexible. And Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens were just starting to become a thing. And it started as New Spring Gardens, so that's the original name of Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. And the reason it was called New Spring Gardens was because there was another Spring Gardens north of the river, so they just wanted to distinguish it from that. And there's a bridge actually that connects you from the main road to this section towards where the camera is pointing. That's called Spring Gardens, so there's still that name still lives on. And so when it started, it was just a quiet place with trees, gravel walks. People would come here to just hang around because it's quite close to the river. And part of it was the appeal was these watermen would ferry people across the river. So they bring them over mostly from the city, Westminster. This was a time when people just wanted to escape from the stench and the stink of the city. And this place was an escape, an oasis, and people would come here on the boats, and this was like an oasis. So as the place started to take off, more and more people turned up. Somebody spotted a commercial opportunity to turn this place into a playground, and that was a man called Jonathan Tyers. And I'll pan across. So there's a little road between Vauxhall City Farm and the farm, the Pleasure Gardens and the farm, and it's called Tyers Street. So I believe it's named after him. So he commercialized what went on here, and actually there was a BBC documentary on this, BBC 4. 10 years ago or maybe longer, and it said that what he set up here, all the parties and events and the circus and the way he drew people and even the catering, the mass catering, the music, the entertainment became like a blueprint for other places for outdoor entertainment, and it inspired similar pleasure gardens in places like Paris, Copenhagen, and even Nashville. I have been to Copenhagen, to the said place in Copenhagen. I believe it's Tivoli Gardens. I have been there. It's very different from this, but according to that documentary, Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens inspired that place. I don't know if it's true. I haven't fact checked it, but it was a BBC documentary, so there must be an element of truth. I've been to Paris, but I don't know. I haven't been. I didn't look into that, but that's an interesting part. So Jonathan Tyers took over and transformed this space into the place to be seen. So he added orchestras, statues, lights, art galleries, food stalls, singing waiters, masked balls. It was just epic. In fact, that scene, if you want to see what it looked like, obviously you can look on YouTube and various places, but I believe there's a scene in Bridgerton. I don't have Netflix, so I haven't seen that series, but I did see a clip of it where they talked about a scene that was inspired by, or that was set in Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens in the 18th century, and they recreated the scene, not here I don't know why they didn't do it here, but this would have been the original place, but just down the road from here or in Vauxhall Park, which is different from. So don't get it confused. Vauxhall Park is different from Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. Vauxhall Park is where I think I have a video on it. I was there a few weeks ago, where the lavender garden is. I'll talk about that. That's also got a very interesting history, and that lavender garden itself has a connection to the name Vauxhall and the car maker and General Motors. So that's also another part of history. So anyway, if you want to see what was hosted and the events that took place and what this place looked like, the fireworks and the orchestras and the music and the dancing and all of that, apparently you can see that in this. I don't know which series it was in Bridgerton. So back to Jonathan Tyers, and he set up, so he was running events 6 nights a week, and it just got bigger and bigger. So we're now in the mid 1700s, and Vauxhall, it had everything. There were fireworks displays, there were live orchestras and instrumental music. There were tightropes and tightrope walkers. There were hot air balloons. I mentioned the hot air balloon ride that some people took from here and landed in Germany. I still cannot believe that, but apparently that happened. I think that was in this book. I might find it. Yeah. And there were giant paintings. And at one point, apparently, there was an elephant just walking around. No idea how an elephant would have ended up here, but they say there was an elephant walking around as part of the entertainment. I'm sure there will be issues around that, but that's what happened. And at one of these concerts, a young Mozart was here. And all you needed was a shilling to get in here and watch Mozart. And you can even hire a supper box, an area to entertain. So that was the peak of the Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens, the mid 1700s, where all sorts have happened. And let me see if I can find maybe some pictures in here in this book. So let me see. So this lion, I think that's Brunswick House. So where is section on Vauxhall Gardens is nightingales and strumpets. Vauxhall Gardens 2-century party. So that's what I was referring to earlier. There was a party here that lasted for 2 centuries. How about that? Pop festival and portion control. Let's go to page 12 and see some pictures, because it is hard to exaggerate what this place looked like. It looked incredible. So that's a picture of Vauxhall Bridge. But that's the Royal Vauxhall Tavern I mentioned. And this place was mentioned in Vanity Fair and all sorts. So here is one of the pictures, and this is what it used to look like. It was a much bigger site. Rows and rows of trees and structures and former gardens, and so this is in its glory days. And there's one in colour here. This is the grand walk between the tree-lined streets, and then these pavilions, I guess we would call them, pavilions and arches. And this actually, especially looking at it, this now reminds me of Tivoli Gardens, because that resembles. I can see some of the inspiration there. This structure comes up often. I think this is what they recreated in Bridgerton. So it says, if you look hard enough and you can see the children. By Victorian times, Vauxhall Gardens was somewhere to take the whole family. And this is the place people used to come to see fine people walking. The Grand Walk, as enjoyed by Frederick, the Prince of Wales. Yeah, this is the place where royalty, people from the connected people from elites used to turn up. I mean, it did decline after a while because the gentry and the elites who used to come here moved further west, and then this place just became a bit I would say seedier, and that's another part of the history. Maybe I'll cover that too. Are there any more pictures? Let me see. The hot air balloon. Let's see what it says about the hot air balloon. Yeah. So, that says November 1836. Charles Green and 2 companions set off on a winter mystery tour from Vauxhall Gardens, landing safely 18 hours later in what is now Germany. Hard to believe. This is what happened. Incredible. Okay, now the sun has come out, so I think I need to move because the sun is setting west that way. I need to find a shade because it's a very, very hot day. Unusually hot day. So let's go into the shade over there, and then I will carry on with the story. I hope you are enjoying it, and if you are, subscribe and like for future parts of the history, the wild history of Vauxhall. Okay, I've found some shade, and you can see more panoramic views of the Pleasure Gardens with St. George Wharf and all the other buildings next to it, and the evening atmosphere. And this is a little path that leads to Tyres Street, and if I walk along, you can see there, that's the rest of the farm, the cafe. And if you want to see more of this area, check out my video on Vauxhall City Farm. This is exactly the spot where I showed the alpacas. Those alpacas have changed. It's not the same. Used to be Tom, Jerry, and another one, 3 of them. But they have moved on and they have replaced them. They're still alpacas, but they are different. I don't know what their names is. Fred, I think, the white one. But let's carry on with the history of the Pleasure Gardens. Okay, so by the 1800s, things had started to slide. The elite moved west, and the Vauxhall crowds got rowdier. And the word pleasure started to mean something very specific. And it became a magnet for gamblers, pickpockets, and working women. And you know what that means. So people still came for the fireworks, the music, but it wasn't the grand upmarket type event. And it was just eventually, by 1859, by 1860, the party ended, the gardens closed, and the land was sold off. And it was just forgotten for a while. I don't know what happened. And eventually the site was built over, then it was bombed during the Blitz, and then it was used as a car park. And I'm not sure what happened to it until about the early 2000s, and then I think some local people started to talk about and discover the history. And then around the mid 2000s, I turned up. I moved here in 2005, and In 2009 actually was this book was published, the book I showed you earlier. That was at the height of the global financial crisis, or the GFC, as it's fondly known. And it was a difficult time. I remember that time. So today, we are in 2025 now. Still have some events, some performances, and especially in the summer there are open air cinemas. Sometimes they would have food festivals, cultural festivals. I think an organization called Vauxhall One hosts events around here, and I mean it is not what it was back then, but and also the of course the farm is a major draw. And yes, the Vauxhall City Farm is more of a draw, I would say. And it started in the late 70s, and it was built by volunteers on a site that was bombed during World War II. And since then, it's just a nice, pocket of green, surrounded by all these tower blocks that have popped up around here. And it kind of harks back, because the Vauxhall City Farm also has communal gardens. Actually, let's go there and have a look at the gardens. So I'm walking towards the other side of the farm, and you can see entrance there. That's the second entrance. There's another one. All the animals are now in. And this is Tyres Street that I mentioned earlier. It is a very nice, leafy, quiet street. So this is Tyres Street, and you can see, oh, there's a fig tree. Wonder if it's fruity. Yay! It's fruity. I have made a video about how to make tea from the leaves. Fig leaf tree is delicious. Try it. Dry it, or even fresh. It's got an amazing fragrant smell. Reminds me of vanilla. But anyway, let me not get sidetracked. So these are the communal gardens of Vauxhall City Farm that I mentioned. They've done a lot of work here to expand it, add lots of new plants, reconfigure it. And I guess it kind of harks back to the gardens in the original Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. Those gardens, they were a mixture of formal and other types of gardens. They had ornamental birds, animals, and even a bear pit at some point apparently. And of course I've already mentioned the elephant. No room for bears or elephants here, but it does make sense to have this here. There's a historical connection, and if you saw from the pictures, and if you look for it yourself, the original Vauxhall Gardens were stunning. Lines and rows of trees and hedges and ornamental gardens and fragrant flowers mixed with pavilions, and it was designed very beautifully. So to conclude, Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens is not the glittering fantasy land that it once was. Far from it. But if you walk around here at sunset, you can kind of imagine the past or its history and why it became that way, because it's right next to the river and it was an escape from what was then the crowded, filthy, stinking city. And people could come here and it was like a playground. Fireworks, drinks, food, music, live instrumental music, orchestras, entertainment. It had it all. And everyone could access it, the rich and the poor to some extent. So this is part one of the wild and wonderful history of Vauxhall. And not sure what I'll cover next. Possibly Brunswick House, possibly Vauxhall Bridge. That also has a very interesting history. And it's the site of where the first crossing, it wasn't the first bridge, but there was a crossing constructed there around 500 BC, I read in this book. And it was more like a causeway that you could cross at low tide. It's very different from what we now consider to be a bridge. So that's the bridge. And Brunswick House is a Georgian house from the 1750s. It's an antique restaurant now. Also has a very interesting history because it survived the war, the Blitz, and all sorts. So there's a lot of history in Vauxhall. There's also its connection with the Vauxhall car, because Vauxhall was first made here in Vauxhall, and that's how it got its name. Of course, the car company moved eventually to Luton in North London, and I think in 1925 the car company itself was acquired by General Motors. And about General Motors, the connection, they built a plaque to kind of remember the history on the old site of the old Sainsbury's, which is now being rebuilt. But there used to be a plaque there on the forecourt area. Just a little piece of history, of the history of the car. And even the name Vauxhall itself has a really interesting history. And one theory, there are several, but one of them that I keep coming across is it's named after a rogue Frenchman that had escaped after killing somebody or another. It was a brutal murder as well, from the description. It's in the book. And that Frenchman escaped and somehow set up a home here, and it used to be, his name is referred to as Falks, Folks, and then Forks, and then his home, Hall, eventually became Vauxhall after many iterations. And there is a very interesting. That man himself has a history that connects him to kings of England through marriage and all sorts of brutality. But despite his history, the place retained his name. And even his standard, his flag, he had his own flag at some point when he was fighting some war with some noblemen, fighting some other king. eventually the car company adopted his standard, and the symbol is still there in Vauxhall cars. The symbol of the car. It says, I think it's a griffon. It's a griffin. That description, and it combines the body of a lion with the head of an eagle, the head and the wing of an eagle. That's the symbol of the Vauxhall car. So there's all sorts of history in Vauxhall. A very underrated, underappreciated part of London, I would say. I think a lot of us, even who live here, don't know much about it because it just doesn't seem like a very interesting place. And I wish more of the history had been retained and more of the buildings had survived. It's a very industrial area. There used to be old gas works and cold storage, car manufacturing, pottery, arts and crafts. The Royal Dalton Pottery Company and ceramics is here. I think Prince Charles at some point wanted to build a craft school here. Endless history. And it makes me think, if we all looked into our own areas, we would find that there's a lot of history. Of course, we rely on it being recorded, and we need to have the time to read and digest it all. But I'm very happy to discover this part of Vauxhall and do my part to share that history. And here is another view of the Pleasure Gardens. Tree-lined. I believe they have also planted Dutch elm disease resistant type of new elm trees. Elm trees also have a lot of history in this area. There's a street called 9 Elms, a whole area called 9 Elms. And I believe it was a gift from the Dutch. But of course, most of them, I think, ended up dying from Dutch elm disease. But the ones they've planted, as you saw in the notice here, are resistant to that. And they have encouraged a type of butterfly that pollinates it, I think, from what it said. But this is also another section of the park where there's a small garden. It's by the bicycle racks. So harking back to its history. Nowhere near on this scale, but it's another pocket, hidden garden. I believe there's a pond somewhere as well. Don't know where that is. Things have dried out a bit because of the weather. Bicycle racks, and there's a tea room down there. And I might show that if there aren't too many people. And there's the tea room, traditional tea room. They do not serve coffee. I warn you, do not go in there and ask for coffee. There might be some hostility. But they used to have shows and theatres and all that in there. But there are all kinds of teas in there. White tea, red tea, black tea. Endless choice. And they do some good food as well. It's right next to the Pleasure Gardens. I think it's a family-owned business. And they have amazing cakes in there. I really recommend the cakes or afternoon tea. They have outside seating as well. And you can see it's a really nice area. Don't sleep on Vauxhall, people. Do not be fooled. may look boring, may sound boring. It is a deceptively interesting place. Just need to dig a little and you'll find all sorts of interesting things here and hidden gems. Actually, lots of people now stay here, I think tourists, when they visit, because it's very convenient. Excellent transport collections. Oh, what is this tree? Wow. I don't know what this tree is. And looks like a tropical garden with all these palm trees. And that road there ahead takes you to a little bridge called, well, I don't know if it's called that, but it's labeled, it's got a sign saying Spring Gardens. So that's a nod to the original name of Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. Because there are all the new buildings along the river. So if you walk across that road, you'll end up by a Portuguese restaurant, cafe restaurant, and then eventually onto the riverfront, the Albert Embankment. I think this is a chestnut tree, right? Conkers. They'll be ready in autumn. Such a nice shade in here on a hot day. Right over there is a very nice pub called the Black Dog. Very nice local pub. And over there, that hill is a playground, children's playground. And this is Vauxhall Walk. Very beautiful road. Behind me is the Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. And to the left is the Black Dog. And all these beautiful plants maintained by a local plant nursery right ahead near Beaconsfield, I think it's called. It's a ceramics, pottery, crafts type place. You might see it when we get there. But yeah, look at this. This is Vauxhall Walk. That's a new, I think, either student accommodation or hotel. I'm not sure. But as I turn around, you can see the pub is on the right. Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens is right ahead where that cyclist is heading. That is the plant nursery I mentioned earlier that maintains the gardens, the public gardens around here. And Beaconsfield is a contemporary arts gallery, ceramics space. It's the Southwest trains. Nursery is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. See the train, Southwest trains in and out of Waterloo. This is cute. It's hard to film here, but very noisy. Very noisy, I was saying. And this is at the end of Vauxhall Walk, which is where I've come from. Over there. So that is the start of the wild and wonderful history of Vauxhall. I'm now heading towards Kennington because I need to go there. But thank you for watching. It's a bit different from what I usually talk about, but there's a connection. I've got plants and gardens. It's about pleasure gardens. So it's not entirely disconnected, it's about my local area. So hope you enjoyed this story, and come back and watch part 2. Like and subscribe. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.